Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. Our top story, Selina Robinson has left the NDP caucus, citing anti-Semitism among some of its members and lack of support in the wake of the October 7th attacks. We'll hear what Premier David Eby had to say this morning, and we'll speak with Selina Robinson in a few moments. We're also asking you, what do you think the NDP needs to do now? After 12:30, the push for more women in the trades ahead of International Women's Day. I'm Michelle Elliott. Welcome to BC Today. Thank you for joining us on CBC Radio 1, CBC Television, and live streaming on the CBC News app, cbc.ca/BC, and on the CBC Vancouver YouTube page. Well, Selina Robinson has resigned from the NDP caucus and will sit as an independent. Last month, Robinson resigned from cabinet as Minister of Post-Secondary Education, and that followed backlash over comments she had made, calling the land that Israel was founded on, quote, a crappy piece of land with nothing on it. She apologized for those comments and committed to taking anti-Islamophobia training. But Premier David Eby said at the time that she needed to step back from cabinet. Yesterday, Robinson announced she was leaving the NDP caucus altogether. And in a letter to caucus, she cited anti-Semitism among some members and said she felt unsupported as a Jewish woman in the party. In her letter, she named MLAs Mabel, Elmore, Aman Singh, Katrina, Chen, and Finn Donnelly. We have requested interviews with them and with Premier David Eby. This morning, Premier David Eby responded to questions from reporters.
Long list of comments that have been made by your colleagues that have been considered anti-Semitic. What does this say to the Jewish community, and do you have a problem in your caucus?
Well, you know, the caucus is certainly feeling quite hurt and sad today. Selina was an important part of our team, and I know Selina's hurting too. As a leader, for me, this is a real day for examination of what the opportunities were where I could have potentially intervened and addressed some of the concerns Selina had. I had a meeting with her just a few hours before she resigned from our caucus. I was checking in with her. How are you doing? How's your relationship with colleagues? How's the community feeling? How's your work going with the Muslim community? And she didn't feel safe raising these issues with me. And so for me, that's a message that I need to examine how I work with our team. Because Selina's voice was an important one in our caucus. She had an experience of the October 7th attacks that nobody else in our caucus had. She had relatives who were called up for military duty. Through her extended friend and family network, she knew people were killed. She knew people were kidnapped. She'd visited the places that had been attacked. And as a result, she was a very important person to be in our caucus and had unique experiences. That was why it was important that she's there. And that's why we're particularly feeling her loss. And as a result, it's a moment for reflection for me about what I could have done to provide support on the issues that she was concerned about, because I think we could have addressed them together.
That's Premier David Eby speaking this morning. In a few moments, we'll take your calls. What do you think the NDP needs to do now? You can call us 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. By email, bctoday@cbc.ca. Selina Robinson joins me now. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you so much for joining us. Why did you feel you needed to leave the NDP caucus?
Well, it's been a hard 5 months, certainly for the Jewish community, and as a very strongly identified Jewish person, and one who was tasked by two premiers to engage with the Jewish community, be their voice. I've taken that role very seriously, certainly with John Horgan and again with David Eby. And I have been bringing to his attention issues, whether they were in caucus, whether they were in the community, about things that were important, things that were happening, and that we needed to have a response. For example, Holocaust education was started by Rob Fleming back in 2017. It sort of disappeared after COVID. It wasn't sort of as active, and this summer asked that we reactivate it, that it was needed. That was before the October 7th massacre. And so we were able to deliver that because we had already started the work. And so I did bring that voice to caucus and to government. But when things became harder over the long term, over the number of months, and we were seeing rises in anti-Semitism on campuses, in union memberships, certainly BCTF, we're seeing that. When we're seeing anti-Semitism, just appearing in civil society, regular protests, hearing from people in the Jewish community that they were afraid, that Holocaust survivors were saying it's happening again. I kept bringing this to various members of caucus, and I was really met with nothing. I didn't hear back what they were doing, and that was very sad, and frankly a bit frightening for me that no one was seeing what I was seeing, and no one was taking what I was saying with any sense of urgency.
Did you speak with the Premier about your concerns?
I spoke with him a couple of times over the months. Certainly, when I saw colleagues were calling on government to, in the days right after the massacre, to do another announcement, some other proclamation about our concerns for the people in Gaza. And I want to be really clear, I'm very concerned for the people in Gaza. This is not about who's suffering more. Everyone is suffering. But the IDF hadn't responded yet, and to have colleagues somehow say that now is the time to say something about the people in Gaza. I did go to the Premier, and to his credit, he said, "Let me deal with it, Selina. You've got enough on your plate." And he did. He did say, to those particular colleagues, one of them anyway, who an hour later sent me a quasi apology. It wasn't quite an apology for his insensitivity. And then I told him in December that I wasn't running again, that getting older, my dad's getting older, I want to spend time with him. My kids are talking about starting a family, and I want to be around. And I did tell him in December that caucus didn't feel right for me since October 7th. And he didn't say anything. He didn't ask me to, expand on that. So, I have had conversations with him. And then, of course, on February 15th, I let him know that I really want to find a way to bring these communities together. I've been reaching out to Muslim leaders, and they have been compassionate and kind and understanding and hurting. And they hear my pain, and they've been amazing conversations. And I want to do that work. And I asked the Premier, can I do this work? And at the end of the day, I was told that no, government, it was too political, that government wasn't able to do that. So I don't know what more I could have done.
But there were calls, though, from some of those groups, numerous calls, right, that were calling for actual removal as Minister of Post-Secondary Education, including the Jewish Faculty Network's UBC chapter. And despite your promise and your commitment to doing work on anti-Islamophobia, was this a matter of the Premier at the time responding to public sentiment?
I can't speak to what the Premier was responding to. The Premier and caucus decided that I needed to step back. What I heard was they were surprised that I hadn't stepped back from making a comment that I didn't intend to hurt anybody. It was me describing land that has been described elsewhere. I didn't sort of make that up. And it hurt people, and I get that, and I've apologized for the ways in which it hurt people. It wasn't intended to hurt people, and I take responsibility for those words. And I've been engaging with Muslim leadership, and again, they have been completely compassionate and eager to work with me to find ways to have the Arab Muslim communities here in British Columbia and the Jewish community here in British Columbia find a way to join together in our respective agony with compassion and understanding, and find a path forward. To me, that's the work government should be doing, is helping to facilitate that.
Okay, and will you continue that work personally?
Absolutely. Absolutely, I'm committed to doing that.
In your letter, you name several MLAs: Katrina, Chen, Mabel, Elmore, Aman Singh, and Finn Donnelly. Why was it important for you to individually name them in your letter?
I wanted to point out that it's not like it's one or two people, that there's this pervasive either silence, so people don't want to touch it. So again, I'm not saying that these people are necessarily anti-Semitic, but their silence means that they're not paying attention to the Jewish community. So for example, with Finn Donnelly, we received the same letter that was full of rhetoric, full of misinformation, impacting Jewish families here in School District 43. Jewish parents were saying to me that they're not going to send their kids to public school. And to me as a New Democrat, for people to not feel that public school is safe of all places, that's a serious problem. That is a very serious problem. And so, to go to my colleague to say, did you get this letter? What are you going to do about it? And to hear I'm going to ignore it, that broke my heart. This is a friend. And so it just feels to me like there's an active desire to just ignore what's happening. And we can't ignore it because silence is complicit. And we've been here before. The Jewish community has been here before, whether it's Eastern Europe or Germany or Spain, over the centuries, when civil society somehow decides that Jews need to be blamed for something. This feels like it's one of those, and government has to stand against that.
Well, this morning, the Premier was asked about Mabel Elmore as choice for Parliamentary Secretary for Anti-Racism, given the comments that you outlined from 2004 in your letter. And let's just play his response to the question on that.
Is Mabel Elmore an appropriate choice for Parliamentary Secretary on anti-racism, given the Jewish community's reservations about dealing with someone who's been so outspoken and anti-Zionist?
So the letter that Selina wrote raised concerns about a number of caucus members. I know that that they're feeling quite hurt about that, and although I disagree with their characterization of many of these issues, it's still cause for me to reflect on why Selina didn't feel comfortable bringing that forward so we could deal with it.
What do you think of his response?
Well, I did bring it forward to the Premier last November around the concerns that I was hearing. And again, I was a vehicle for the Jewish community. Jewish leadership were very concerned at the outset, given their history with Mabel Elmore, given her past comments when she was made parliamentary secretary. But it was this last November when they expressed some additional concerns that I did go to the Premier's office. I did say that Jewish community is losing their mind over recent comments by Mabel, and they are asking for her to step down, for the Premier to do something. And his response, I left that with him, and my understanding is the Jewish community was told that they were to deal directly with Nikki Sharma in order to just bypass Mabel.
To the minister.
To go to the minister responsible. And so again, it was one of those things where I'm just trying to demonstrate the double standard here, right? That when the Jewish community is outraged or hurt, that a simple apology, a retraction of some kind was sufficient. And that's been going on for some years. And so and this list actually was one that I got from the Jewish community leadership. I wasn't keeping score. I don't want anyone to think that I was doing that. But they have been saying, and they have been keeping track of the ways in which they as a community have been hurt and how government has not responded.
This morning, Katrina Chen posted on X, not wanting to see more kids and people die in Gaza is not anti-Semitism. Is there room in the party for differing views on this conflict?
This isn't about the conflict. I want to be really clear. I don't want to see anyone die anywhere. My concern was when Katrina Chen added her voice to Amin Singh, 72 hours after the massacre. No, there had been no retaliation. There had been no IDF forces gathered. Ben Mizrahi had not yet been buried. People were reeling, were grieving, were stunned and shocked at what they saw on October 7th. And the only thing my colleagues could say is we need to do a public statement about the plight of the Palestinian people. That was what was anti-Semitic in that moment. Of course, it's not anti-Semitic to feel for the people of Gaza, to feel for Palestinians. Of course it's not. But I think it's important to understand the timing of her comment, when she meant it, when she delivered it, and the context in which she delivered it. It was cruel.
The Premier said he is meeting with Jewish groups tomorrow. What does he need to do to provide support for the Jewish community?
I think the Jewish community needs to see action. There's been a lot of words spoken, but there hasn't been action. There are serious challenges in civil society right now. The anti-Jewish and Jewish hatred activity that we are seeing is something that I have never witnessed in my entire 60 years on this planet. It's stories that I've heard from my great-grandparents who left the pogroms of Russia, those where the hordes come and intimidate and terrorize small villages of Jews in Russia and in Poland. And that's what it feels like when folks gather calling for the destruction of Jews, calling for the destruction of Israel. That's what happens to Jewish people. We feel afraid. I hear the stories of my great-grandparents. It's the same thing around those whose family history might have been in Germany in the 1930s and 40s. This is traumatizing for the Jewish community, and we need to put an end to the activities that we're seeing on campuses. We need to put an end to the threats that Jewish people are feeling in the workplace, and I think we need to find a way to heal and to bring the Arab, Muslim, and Jewish communities together to talk. That's really where peace happens. And that's what I think this government needs to be doing. And I know that that's the work that I'm committed to doing as an independent.
You were elected, first elected in 2013. What impact has this whole experience had on you personally?
That's a great question. I want to be clear, I wouldn't trade anything for the world in terms of the work that I've done as an MLA here in Coquitlam-Mallardville, or the work that I've done in government as a Minister of Finance, Minister of Housing, Minister for Local Governments, Minister of Post-Secondary Education and Future Skills. I think as a government, we've done a really good job, and I'm very proud of the work that I've done. One of the things for me that's been really hard over these last number of months is I felt like I couldn't use my voice, that I was being silenced because it wasn't safe. It wasn't safe in government, it wasn't safe in caucus, and it certainly, as you can see what happened when I got lazy with my language and I said something that hurt people, the vitriol, the hate, the death threat that I got, I think that's dangerous for our democracy. I think that is not acceptable behavior from the public towards a public elected official. I think that that's really dangerous. And so that's disappointing that that's where we're at. But I also think we need to sort of, I want to say, calm down and be curious about people's perspectives. I am fine with people having different perspectives, but to call for their dismissal, to call for their annihilation, to call for their silence, to demand their head because they said something that perhaps offended some people, I think we're better than that. And I think that's part of the dialogue that we need to have as British Columbians.
Ms. Robinson, thank you so much for spending the time with us this afternoon.
Thank you very much. Have a great day.
You too. Selina Robinson is now the independent MLA for Coquitlam-Mallardville. It's 12:24, 1:24 in the Mountain Time Zone. You're with BC Today. We're going to take your calls on this in a moment and ask you what you think the NDP needs to do now. We'll speak with a political scientist as well. For some letters, though, a CBC investigation has discovered alleged abuse of a BC Housing affordable home ownership program. BC Housing is suing more than a dozen people, accusing them of lying to be able to obtain condos that were priced below market prices. The allegations haven't been proven in court. We took your calls on this yesterday. Here are some of your emails. Why should the enforcement be more lax than it is policing welfare recipients, homeless, and or Indigenous people who contravene the law and find themselves in jail or prison for property crimes, stealing, etc., etc.? Carol writes from Victoria, those who have the means to cheat should not be left off the hook because they are wealthy enough and most likely had connections with developers, etc. Developers must also be disciplined. Their desire to make money is not a justification for not following the rules. Jackie writes, my question is, what person is actually responsible for checking if the buyers are eligible? What entity, legal, bank employees, government departments actually validates the buyer's eligibility for income and qualifications? I believe there needs to be substantial consequences for fraud. Kathy asks, I am astonished that the public is subsidizing ownership of property of this kind. What is the rationale for this? And Bernadette writes, in Sydney, in 2016 or 17, the BC government identified a shortage and need for subsidized housing for lower income people. Yet now in 2024, we are woefully behind in our targets for subsidized housing and supply. Time has passed since then. There is a woeful shortage. This is reprehensible behavior. Thank you for your emails. bctoday@cbc.ca. Back to our top story now today. Selina Robinson has resigned from the NDP caucus, saying she felt unsupported as a Jewish woman in the government party. And we spoke with her just a few moments ago. We're taking your calls as well, asking you what you want the NDP to do now. And our numbers are 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. Harun Khan is a director with Vancouver's Al-Masjid Al-Jamia Mosque, and CBC spoke to him yesterday. He described Robinson's comments last month as painful. He told CBC News yesterday that he wishes Robinson well.
Ultimately, we're all citizens here, and we're all together shaping a narrative of what we'd like to our province to be, our country, our society at large. And it takes many voices to do that. And she's certainly one of them. And when we join together, whether we agree or disagree, it's important to have those tough conversations. And, now that she's citing a perceived anti-Semitism, I'm, again, at a loss as to how do you combat anti-Semitism or Islamophobia or racism of any time? You have to engage. You have to go and be part of a conversation to bring these things to light. And, we abhor racism or discrimination against any group of people, and especially at this time where passions are inflamed, we don't equate, genuine criticism or condemnation, for that matter, of the state of Israel for a condemnation of the Jewish people. There are friends, there are neighbors, there are brothers and sisters in the Abrahamic faith that we all share between Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. That's inescapable. But the fact of the matter is there's a horrible thing going on, and we can't sweep it under the rug, and we can't point fingers. As Canadians and nations around the world that support the rule of law, many countries have supported the state of Israel. And unfortunately, there's a genocide going on, and they're the ones doing it. So we have to understand that it's a difficult situation for everyone, and people are siloed in their individual communities, but we have to step out for them from those silos and speak and get together and hopefully make a change for the better.
That's Harun Khan, director with Vancouver's Al-Masjid Al-Jamia Mosque. Joining me now is SFU political scientist Sanjay Jam, a senior lecturer in political science at Simon Fraser University. I really appreciate your time. I know you've been sitting listening to these interviews. This is certainly a developing story this morning. Can you tell me what you make of this unfolding situation right now?
No, I can't. Sorry.
Okay, it sounds like the professor is unable to hear us right now, and he's speaking with our control room at the moment. So, Sanjay, can you hear me?
I can, yeah.
Oh, wonderful. I really appreciate this. I know you've been listening to the interview and being flexible in terms of your schedule. I really appreciate that. I'll get just one comment from you now before we continue after the news here. What do you make of this developing situation right now then?
That's a very broad question. I mean, it's obviously a challenging situation. I think, that we'll find out more as this unfolds. But with respect to, I think some speculation about the electoral implications of this and whether that's sort of a factor in what's going on. It's an interesting argument, and one that certainly requires a little more analysis, because if we think about the position of the BC NDP as a center-left party, predominantly, but a party that because of its status as the governing party, and also because it doesn't really have a mainstream competitor on the left, does sort of try to straddle the center with its ideology, with its rhetoric, with its policies. And what you have here is an issue that, for the most part, not exactly, but outside of those communities affected, seems to be more or less sort of aligning on right-left terms, like a lot of issues these days. And we see that in the United States, where Joe Biden is having a difficult time with the potential of losing a lot of left-wing voters who disagree with his position, which is more pro-Israel. And so I think we can see and the potential here, and what perhaps playing out in the background is the concern is that even though this is not an issue that has direct relevance to provincial jurisdiction, it's still in this global world where people are global citizens and take interest in international affairs, that even provincial politicians are sort of forced to sort of think about these issues with respect to their sort of electoral fortunes. And that's in some ways unfortunate. And I think that hopefully that's not the case, and these are all sort of genuine sort of feelings and sentiments that are being expressed on both sides. But it's really hard to say. But I just thought that was important to sort of put out there.
So the politics of it, as well as those genuine sentiments that you're talking about, and let's dig deeper into that coming up after the news here. And I know that Lauren is waiting at Gabriola Island. We will go to Lauren first, coming up after the CBC News update. And here now is Rob Zimmerman.
Good afternoon. A 19-year-old has been charged with 6 counts of first-degree murder after 6 people were killed last night in an Ottawa home. The suspect, Fabrio de Zoysa, is a Sri Lankan national who is believed to be in Canada as a student. Police say the victims are a mother, her 4 children, and a family acquaintance. The kids ranged in age from 7 years old to 2 months. While police did not speculate on a motive for the killings, a spokesperson said investigators do not believe it to be a case of intimate partner violence. And about 100 people have been displaced after a fire broke out at a Coquitlam apartment complex early this morning. Some people had to be rescued from their balconies, and there were some tense moments when a floor collapsed and a firefighter fell through. Officials say he suffered minor injuries and has been released from hospital. The cause of the fire is under investigation. And now the forecast. Snowfall warnings are in place for the central interior, including Prince George. Snow is also expected over sections of Howe Sound, and winter storm warnings are in effect for the north coast with up to 45 centimeters of snow there. Elsewhere, highs to 0 and mainly sunny this afternoon in the Peace. In the central interior, mainly cloudy with a high of 0 as well. Highs from 2 to 5 with lots of sunshine in the Kootenays. In the southern interior, including Kelowna, a high of 5 and sunny this afternoon. And for Metro Vancouver, Greater Victoria, and the Fraser Valley, a mix of sun and cloud with highs around 7. That's your CBC News update from Vancouver.
What do you think? Is it outside weather yet?
I was outside this morning. Yeah, it was lovely, but it's going to start raining tonight. So
That's and for quite a while, right? Yeah.
Yes, for the next 6 weeks.
Gonna have to wait then. I don't know. I've been going for walks. Late last night, I was out just at the pharmacy at about 9 p.m. Decided to go for a walk. It was so lovely and brisk. The air was so fresh. I thought I'm gonna go for a walk right around the block.
Good call, Michelle.
Yeah.
And we have daylight saving time this weekend, correct?
This weekend, yes.
So you will have an extra hour of daylight then.
How?
So that's nice.
Yeah, yes, that will be luxurious, given that I mostly get up at 5 a.m. So,
But then isn't it darker in the morning though?
yeah,
Correct? Darker longer?
trust me, I don't want to wake up at 5 a.m.
Yeah.
This is not voluntary.
Is it the kids? That's early.
It's the kids. It's needing to get started on my work. If you want to know my schedule, that's what
Yeah.
it is. And then I'm in bed by 9.
I sort of have the same schedule actually, but mine's for tennis, so
Yeah,
it's a little more relaxed.
Yeah, that's way more favorable. Okay, well, enjoy the extra hour.
Thank you.
6 o'clock then it is. Rob,
Yeah.
thanks so much.
See ya.
Rob Zimmerman in the CBC Vancouver newsroom. Welcome back to BC Today. And back to our top story now. The former Minister of Post-Secondary Education, Selina Robinson, has resigned from the NDP caucus, and she will sit as an independent in Coquitlam-Millardville. And in her remarks, she says she felt unsupported as a Jewish woman in her party. And that there are anti-Semitic voices in the NDP caucus. Joining me now is Sanjay Jam, who's a senior lecturer in political science at Simon Fraser University. And you were talking about political alignments earlier, and what the pressure on politicians in terms of what they say when it comes to international events. What is needed of politicians right now when you are faced with pain in communities and polarization?
It's really interesting because I think over time there has been the growing expectation that even provincial and local leaders will sort of comment in the context of these events. That isn't something that perhaps decades ago would have been norm. And frankly, if you really think about the role that they're elected to play and the jurisdiction that they have, it doesn't actually make logical sense, but that's where we are in the world. And I think people have to expect it, and whether or not it's, I don't really have a strong stance on whether it's good or bad, but that's where we are. And I think it does become challenging because, we've seen that, not surprisingly, that certain politicians have had more difficult time expressing their position, or because they feel that ideological pressure because perhaps part of their constituency is split on the issue, right? Whereas some have used it to their advantage, where they feel like it's a more homogenous viewpoint within their constituency, so they're able to sort of invoke their opinion more strongly. And so the fact that we can sort of start to see the not precisely, but we can start to see those alignments if we look across jurisdictions in the U.S. and elsewhere. So it's certainly a factor.
Really appreciate your time and your patience on this developing story today. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Sanjay Jam, a senior lecturer in political science at Simon Fraser University. We asked you, what do you think the NDP needs to do now? And Lauren is joining us from Gabriola. Thank you as well for your patience, Lauren.
You're welcome. So I'm struggling to stay calm here. Normally, I have no problem talking on the radio, but this is sort of, I guess, feels personal. I'm Jewish. I raised money as a kid. I went to a synagogue in Toronto. I raised money for Israel by carrying a little blue box door to door. And it's very, very divisive and disturbing. So I do think the NDP needs to resist calls by, I'll have to say, fairly influential people and lobbies. And I believe the inquiry into foreign interference needs to extend to the Israeli government.
Where do you see that there's
So
foreign
I
interference?
absolutely think it was correct to remove her from cabinet, and I don't understand if she's that interested in dialoguing that she's leaving the party, taking her ball and bat, going home after being excluded. But listening to her, she's like saying the right things, and what's going on is terrible. And it was terrible for, I felt horrible hearing about the massacre in the kibbutz at the rave in sight of Gaza, and at the other kibbutzes that had nothing to do with the rave. And but overall, what happened to Jeremy Corbyn? So I think the NDP has to be really careful not to bow. In Ontario, a member was thrown out for not sufficiently, in the moments after the massacre, sufficiently giving, a balance to this or that.
What do you think that Premier Eby needs to do then? He is meeting with Jewish leaders and communities tomorrow, as he mentioned today. What does he need to? What are the steps he needs to take?
I think he needs to have some dialogue with them over why people are so upset about an ongoing genocide. The way to honor Holocaust victims And to honor 2,000 years of persecution is not to suddenly jump over and say we're part of the Judeo-Christian. There was only the Christian civilization before World War II. After some Jews decided to become part of the empire and the Judeo-Christian
let's just
against the world.
And so you're saying he needs to speak with the community and hear why there's so much
I think
pain.
he needs to be firm about why people are upset, including a huge number of progressive Jews who may not belong to synagogues. I'm not very comfortable in synagogues very much. I went to High Holy Days in Phoenix, Arizona, to Chabad, and they made an appeal for IPAC, the worst pro-Israel lobby group.
I'm going to move on to our next topic at this point, but I really appreciate hearing from you and what you're talking about when it comes to what you want to see from Premier David Eby now. Thank you very much for the call.
Bye.
That's Lauren. Take care. Lauren joining us from Gabriola Island. It's 12:42 now, 1:42 in the Mountain Time Zone. This is BC Today here on CBC. We have emails as well, and Scott is emailing from Burnaby. In light of the recent resignation of the NDP MLA, the government needs to improve confidence in elected officials. One action they can take is to publish a public declaration of scope of competence for each MLA and civil servant. Then the public can expect MLAs to make decisions within their scope of competence or find expert advice. One small, easy step for government. Joanne in Victoria writes, I am First Nation, and what stands out to me regarding the war in Gaza is a deep-rooted loathing toward each other. First Nations in Canada were forced or in recent times have made the choice to live peacefully in a country that was stolen. What our people have not done is shown demonstrative hatred towards citizens in Canada who are not responsible for their ancestors 200 years ago. And another email from Bruce, who writes, interesting long interview with Selina Robinson, but she did not and could not make me more curious about why a government of settlers wants to institute apartheid. It's absolutely revolting to me that I'm privileged by what happened here on Turtle Island. Thank you so much for all of your emails. bctoday@cbc.ca is where you can reach us. It's 12:43, 1:43 in the Mountain Time Zone. Well, tomorrow is International Women's Day, and it's a day when we talk about progress and equality and discuss how far that progress still needs to go. In the world of trades, the recruitment and retention of women is an ongoing challenge, and that's according to the Canadian Apprenticeship Forum. That group is aiming to provide more training and mentoring for women and gender-diverse individuals. We're asking you as well in this last 20 minutes of the program, are you a woman or a gender-diverse individual working in trades? What are the challenges and what drew you to it? You can call us 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. You can also email bctoday@cbc.ca. Joining me now is France Davio. She's CEO of the Canadian Apprenticeship Forum. Hello, good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much for taking the time. I'm sure you're very busy. I know you're at a conference and you've taken time out with us. What's the state of the participation of women and gender diverse individuals in the trades right now?
Yeah, well, we're going to look at apprenticeship numbers because that's data that's collected provincially and nationally. So it's a little bit easier to gauge the women's participation in the trades when we look at apprenticeships. So in terms of apprenticeship registrations, the good news is, so let's start with the good news, is that in 2018, the national percentage was around 4.5% of women that had registered as apprentices. And in 2022, we're at 5.8%. So there has been some progress. Now, I'm a little reluctant to, be exuberantly happy about this because one of the things that we often sort of disassociate is the recruitment and the retention of women in the trades, but they're very, very much linked. I'll give you an example. We may be recruiting more women into the trades, but if the women that are currently in the trades have a bad experience and leave, they're not necessarily good ambassadors to recruit more women into those trades. And unfortunately, in Canada, and this is similar in other countries that have similar apprenticeship programs, the completion rate. So for women that do enter an apprenticeship in a skilled trade, the completion rate generally in Canada is around 36%.
Wow.
So for men, it hovers around 50. So for women, it's significantly lower. And there are various reasons why this may happen, and
Why is
different
that?
trades have different. Well, and there are some very legitimate reasons why people in general may leave the trades, right? It's not for them, or they moved on to something else. But what I want to focus on are the things that we could have done differently for women to stay in the trades, and that is, did we provide them with adequate training, adequate on-the-job training, adequate supports? Did they have regular work? Because as an apprentice, 80% of your learning is on the job. So you need to be actively working in order to complete your apprenticeship hours. And there is still this, unfortunately, in 2024, an issue, I'm not saying everywhere, but on some work sites in terms of culture, welcoming, inclusive cultures. There are still, and maybe maybe this will require a generational shift. I'm not sure what the solution is, other than enforcing policies around harassment and bullying in the workplace, but that still happens. So we know that that's why some women are leaving.
Okay. And what are the efforts? What can you describe further? What issues are there in that culture, and how do you change that?
Well, what we know works is that there are grassroots local organizations whose job it is to support women in the trades. And what I mean by support, I mean provide holistic support. Whether it's finding childcare, or helping manage schedules, or helping just in terms of upskilling or essential skills. So those organizations that create the wraparound services for women entering the trades, they really, really make a difference. And there are organizations, for example, in BC, the BC Centre for Women in Trades and Technology, that is wonderful at offering those services. We also know.
Pardon me, but in terms of the culture, what are the issues there?
Well, organizations like that would work with employers. For example, BCC WIT, which I just mentioned, they have Be More Than a Bystander training, which is not for women. That training is for allies and for people on the work site, for supervisors, for the journey persons that are responsible for mentoring, for the HR people responsible for enforcing the policies. That's what we need. This is not a women's issue, right? This is a societal issue. So the people on the work sites need to just get on board. And when you have a policy, a workplace policy against workplace harassment or bullying, it's only as good as its enforcement. So if it's a piece of paper or a document that sits on a web page somewhere, that really doesn't mean anything. You really have to have the guts as an employer to do something with those that aren't creating safe workplaces. And the other thing one of the things that will help create change in the work culture will be getting more women in leadership positions. So if you can get women in decision-making, authority, positions of authority, decision-making authorities, then they can influence change, and it could be sustainable. And that's what the programs that the Canadian Apprenticeship Forum is working on right now.
Okay. We are asking you, if you are a woman or gender diverse individual working in the trades, you can give us a call asking you what's your experience, what drew you to it, and what are the challenges that you're facing? 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. And by email, it's bctoday@cbc.ca. My guest is France Davion, CEO of the Canadian Apprenticeship Forum. And Dawn is joining us. Dawn is in Duncan right now, but is from Vancouver. Hi there, Dawn.
Hi, Michelle.
Thanks so much for calling in. Tell us a bit about what you do and what your experience has been.
Okay. Well, I'm currently getting back into film, as many people are after the writer's strike and the actor's strike. And I work in the construction department in film.
Okay. I can't imagine what the past, year, certainly several months has been like for you.
Yeah, and it's compounded with I've actually been off for a lot longer than that with a workplace injury, a partial rotator cuff tear.
Okay. And so you've worked in the film industry in terms of construction when it comes to sets. What was your experience before you were injured?
Well, it was an entirely different environment for me, as I used to be a subcontractor in tattooing. So I was used to a certain level of independence and not having to, stop for coffee breaks or anything like that.
Right.
But what was also different was being in a union and having certain standards when it came to dress codes and things that you were okay to say or not allowed to say. And then there is a real significant sort of glass ceiling, and I've encountered quite a bit of sort of gendered related things where it's like, okay, well, you'll only get this far in this industry.
Wow. What was that like for you to try to constantly kind of fight against that?
Well, I have found that you have to be a certain amount of feminine and then not too feminine. And when some of my male coworkers asked one of our male bosses, why don't you hire more women? His response, and I've heard this from several of my male coworkers, was, I don't want my guys to have affairs.
Oh my
and
goodness.
I just couldn't believe that when you're dealing with an arts industry and, we're working 10 hours a day, but this is hard work. This is physical labor.
Sure.
And I couldn't believe that was like a basis for not hiring more women. And I had made a joke with some of the other guys, like, because they said, oh, well, we got this person and they're so great and they worked in this and this and this. And I said, oh, so now you guys have filled your quota for your one middle-aged woman? And they were like, yeah.
Oh, it wasn't a joke for them.
Kidding. Yeah. And I was like, oh, my goodness.
Oh my gosh.
It's really disappointing. And prior to that, I had applied to a concrete company that makes fountains and stuff like that. I got an email back, you're hired. We're going to start this gig on Monday. I'm going to call you. It was on Friday, and we'll set up and let you know where to start. And the guy called me up, and he goes, oh, you're female. And I said, yeah. And he goes, oh, yeah, I'll get back to you.
Oh.
And that was it.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, Dawn. What?
And
you're heading into, you're back in the film industry now. How confident do you feel in a better environment? Hopefully. Well,
I'm not really sure. I mean, because I'm kind of like past the age of being considered like a cute recruit. And I'm getting to the age where it's like, oh, is she just too old and broken? So it's going to be a bit of a challenge.
There's a lot of gender stereotyping there, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, and there is a certain, like women become invisible. As we age, we become kind of invisible. And so, and that's, whether it's because we start going gray and our eyebrows lighten and everything else, but you are kind of like, there is a certain level of like not being sexually viable, but then maybe you're not a sexual threat. And it's just such an odd kind of weird thing. And in the past, I have worked so much so that I have put myself, like I've injured myself because I've overdone it. Because it was like trying to overprove that I was competent.
Oh my goodness. Dawn, you've raised so many. What a complex set of issues you've raised there. Gender stereotypes, discrimination. Thank you so much. All the best to you as you head back into work, okay? Take care.
Thank you very much. And we work better when we have cognitive variance, when we have physical variance, when we have gender, ethnic, everything variance. We work better.
Dawn, thank you. What a call. Franz, I just have a couple of minutes left, but wow. I mean, I can see you nodding as you're listening to Dawn there.
Well, that's terrible. What a terrible experience.
Yeah.
And I'm so sorry that Dawn lived that. I mean, there are things that are Like there are people doing some actively good work, and I think Dawn mentioned at the beginning that there was a glass ceiling, and there are programs out there like the National Leadership Development Program for Women in the Trades and the Mentor Development Program, that's their sole purpose is to equip women to get into those supervisory jobs in order to affect change on the work site and to break that glass ceiling that Dawn was talking about, and to make sure that on site there is active policies against what Dawn was encountering, which was terrible.
You were talking about a be beyond a bystander, is that right? I mean, I can imagine that, really being valuable in those kinds of moments.
Yeah, absolutely. That training is invaluable, and everyone needs to go through it, in my opinion. But yeah, culture change is difficult, but there has to be a zero tolerance. There just has to be a culture of zero tolerance. And until we get there, and it's hard to be a culture of zero tolerance when there's a skilled trade shortage. And as an employer, just trying to keep everybody that you can. So, if you're in a situation where perhaps your best person is not being inclusive or is being targeted and harassing, it may be a complicated decision, but it's not a hard one. You need to make it.
Really appreciate your time as well. And I know you're very busy today, so I appreciate you making some time for us.
I appreciate the time. Thank you.
France Delvaux is CEO of the Canadian Apprenticeship Forum. Thanks so much to Dawn for that call. Our email is bctoday@cbc.ca.